When I was 17, my buddies and I were playing football at the elementary school near our home, and since nobody had broken a bone in the game we just played, we decided we'd try to kill each other on the school's playground equipment. Because the elementary school had a death wheel. Let me put a picture of it on the screen. Did you grow up playing on one of these? These little roundabouts? They're made for like 7-year-olds, not for 17-year-olds. See, the engineers who designed a death wheel figured out that no matter how many kids try to run in a circle to spin that wheel, their top speed is limited by the centrifugal force that causes a kid to move outward as they try to spin this circular object. In other words, the physics will fling you off before you can go too fast. Which works for 7-year-olds. But not so much for 17-year-olds. After about a half hour of seeing who could stay on the death wheel the longest while the rest of us ran it in circles, we spotted a spool of thick rope in my friend's truck. And we thought, what if we could spin this wheel like a pull cord on a lawnmower? So we wound the rope around that wheel 6 or 7 times, and let me tell you, 8 guys running straight together can spin that wheel at unprecedented speeds. We spun ourselves silly on that thing. And then to take things up a notch, one of us decided to tie the rope to the bumper on the truck. For about an hour, we've been pulling that rope with 8 guy horsepower. Now we've got my friend's Chevy K10 truck. It's got a V8 and 402 cubic inches of horsepower. We were giddy with excitement. And I turned to my friends and I said, hey, any of you guys got the guts to ride the wheel first? And they turned it around on me. Ray, you do it. We dare you. And you know, with an ego bigger than my muscles and the wonders of a teenage brain, I moved to the very middle of that death wheel. And I gripped the bar in front of me as tightly as I could. Friends, I don't know how to describe what happened to me next. When my buddy hit the accelerator on his pickup, my legs flew out from beneath me. And now I'm like a boy in a blender. I hit every bar with every bone in my body. Unfortunately, taking that dare was not the only dumb thing I had done. While my buddies were winding the rope around the wheel, I thought it best to tie my end of the rope to the wheel. You know, so it wouldn't fly off and hit me. Well, that was a bad idea. Any physicist here? Do you know what happens to like a 165-pound boy when a wheel spinning at like 40 miles an hour comes to a complete stop? He doesn't. My friends say I flew so far off that wheel that the Air Force Base scrambled jets. Listen, some dares lead you to crowd-pleasing heroic acts. Others lead you to the Dumb Moves Hall of Fame. You know, over the next 5 weeks, this death wheel survivor, he's got a dare that's going to lead you on the most fantastic spiritual adventure of your life. Actually, I can't even predict what kind of adventure it will be. Actually, nobody can. Because the dare I have for you in this series is to move closer to God. That's it. It's to look at where you are now and to move closer. You say, well, why is that a dare? Well, it's a dare because getting close to the creator of the universe takes guts. Rudolf Otto, a religious anthropologist, not a Christian, he wrote a book entitled The Idea of the Holy, where he said in any culture, in any religion, when people come into the presence of God, they find it very disturbing, extraordinarily frightening, and incredibly dangerous. Because anytime you move near to God, you are moving near to the wild center of the universe. You are riding the death wheel. The best example of this is in one of the great stories of the Bible. It happens at the apex of Jacob's life, at the moment that he decides to move closer to God, only to discover that God is a wrestler. You see, before this moment in Jacob's life, he kept God at a distance. But after it, he is a changed man. Now, if you're a note taker, relax for a bit, because I just want to give you Jacob's backstory and then show you how he moved closer to God. And then you can whip out your pen as we look at how we can apply this ancient passage to our 21st century lives. Jacob's backstory starts with a promise that God made to his grandfather, Abraham. You can read about the promise in Genesis chapter 12 or 17 and 22. But let me summarize it for you. God told Abraham one day, hey, this world's a mess, but I'm going to save it through your family. In every generation of yours, Abraham, I'm going to choose a child who will be, in essence, the Messianic child. And Abraham, you must be sure to pass your faith on to that child, because it's through that child will come another, and from that child another, and another, until one day in the future, the actual Messiah will be born. Now, the first kid in this Messianic line, it's Jacob's dad, Isaac. And Isaac learns that he's going to pass this on to one of his kids. But he ends up with twin boys, Esau and Jacob. Esau's the firstborn, Jacob is kid number 2. But God sends a message to this family while the boys are still in the womb. This is Genesis 25:23. It says the older will serve the younger, which means the last kid out, Jacob, is the Messianic child. But Isaac, he doesn't like that. So Isaac fights God's choice. He favors his older kid, and he kind of hides it behind the culture's idea of the oldest being the most important kid. You see, back then, if a family was wealthy, the cultural law was that you wouldn't divide up the wealth between the 2 kids. No, the bulk of the wealth would go to the oldest child, so the family wouldn't lose its rank in society. The other kid just gets the crumbs. So Isaac used this cultural norm to justify the kid that he wanted to be chosen. Now, I share all of this because, the Bible isn't a set of like Aesop's fables, each one with their own little moral. No, the Bible is the story of God unveiling his plan of salvation to the world. All the parts fit together. So if you read Jacob's story without knowing his dad's story, you kind of think that Jacob's the one who made all the wrong moves. But the reality is the worst sin in this epic is Isaac's, because Isaac is fighting God. He's positioning his firstborn, Esau, as the Messianic child when he knew God had already chosen his secondborn, Jacob. So Jacob, this not-so-favorite child, he grows up with his brother and his dad standing between him and his destiny. And by the time that Isaac makes the formal choice as to which kid will receive the blessing, his eyes have failed him, and he's blind. So Jacob takes advantage of this. He dresses up in his brother's clothes, stands before his dad, and he says, essentially, here I am, Dad, bless me. And Isaac kind of knows the voice isn't right, but this is Genesis 27:27. It says, when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him. He thought he was Esau. So Jacob is now appointed as the family's leader. And then comes verse 30. After Isaac finished blessing him and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau comes in from hunting. Verse 32. His father asked him, well, who are you? Well, I'm your son, he answered. You're your firstborn, Esau. And Isaac's like, oh, if you're Esau, who did I just give the blessing to? And they both knew it was Jacob. And Esau turns to his dad and he says, well, so what? Bless me anyways. Now, unless you get the theology when you read this, it's kind of easy to think, well, Jacob secured a contract on fraudulent grounds. That's easily overturned in court. Just fix it, Dad. But what's happening in this family here goes far beyond mere contract law. See, where it says that Isaac is trembling, do you see that where it says Isaac's trembling? Verse 33 says Isaac is trembling violently. He's not trembling with anger. He's fighting God. Suddenly, Isaac realizes that all of his life, that's who he's been fighting. He's been fighting God. And this little error that just happened is God's way of saying, see, you think you had this all figured out, Isaac, but nothing disrupts my plan. And Isaac realizes that, and he refuses to reverse his choice. And so he says, this is verse 33, I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed. Isaac's repenting. He's saying, look, I'm done fighting God. But Esau? Oh, no, he's not. That day, Esau swears he's going to kill his brother. And that's the backstory. Now, enter Jacob. Jacob knows God's chosen him as the Messianic child, but, Jacob thinks the big problem in his life is that his brother wants to kill him and his father never loved him. So instead of trusting God, he takes destiny into his own hands. He thinks, I can't trust God to give me my destiny. I've got to help God. So actually, what Jacob's doing is the very thing that he hates his father for. Instead of trusting in God, he takes matters into his own hands, like father, like son. He steals his brother's blessing, and now he's got to run away from the very land he's supposed to inherit because his brother wants to kill him. So one day, Jacob decides to go home and face his brother. So he gathers all his wealth in this foreign nation which he's been living, all his family, and in this huge entourage, he heads home. Why? Well, because he wants the land that he's to inherit. And he thinks he's got enough money now to buy himself out of this problem with his brother. Now, as you read chapter 32, you learn, like, Jacob's kind of a spin doctor. He's very calculating. He's very manipulative. Genesis 32:7 says, in great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and the herds and the camels as well. And he thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that's left may escape. That's his first move. Very strategic. Divide things up. The second thing he does is in verse 13. From what he had with him, he selects a gift for his brother Esau. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, 10 male donkeys, and a partridge in a pear tree. And he puts them in care of his servants, each herd by itself. This is a massive gift. And this spin doctor Jacob, he doesn't send it all at once. No, he sends it out in 7 waves of wealth. And he tells, like his FedEx drivers, right, as they deliver the gifts, he tells them, hey, tell Esau more money's coming. More gifts are on their way. Another wave of wealth is coming your direction. I mean, Jacob, he's like making it rain gold. He's throwing money at his biggest problem because he's got no idea if Esau is going to kill him or forgive him. And now we kind of reach the apex of this epic story. Now we move to Jacob's big move. He's divided his family. He sent 7 waves of gifts. And now he's down to the last 15 in his entourage. Verse 22. That night, Jacob got up. He took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 sons, and he crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions. So Jacob was left alone. Why? Because Jacob wants Esau alone. He thinks if Esau kills him, everybody else in the family is going to escape. But he also knows that after all those gifts he sent, if he meets his bro alone, his brother might just pity him and spare his life. This is the climax right here of Jacob's life. Everything points to this moment in his mind. He's finally going to face his biggest problem. He's going to deal with the brother he's fought all these years. This is verse 24. Jacob was left alone, like he's standing in the dark, alone. Or is he? Suddenly, he feels someone behind him. And as he turns, he's attacked. Verse 24 says, a man wrestled with him till daybreak. You know what that means? Any of you wrestle? Wrestling's like one of the most physically demanding sports you can do. Matches are like 7 minutes, and both wrestlers are winded after those 7 minutes. So do you know what it means here? That Jacob is wrestling until daybreak? It means he is absolutely matched in strength. I mean, that's the only way that you can have a wrestling match that goes on that long, because it seems nobody is going to win. But let me tell you what's happening here. The other night, my 2 young adult sons, Ethan and Trevor, they came over the house to teach me how to play a video game. I did not grow up with video games. Neither did my kids, actually. But now that they're living on their own, they're like pros at it. So they popped this game into the PlayStation. I think they call it Call of Duty. And Ethan says, hey, Dad, the game's easy. You just try to shoot me before I shoot you. And for like 3 rounds, I feel pretty good about my skills. Because each time I get Ethan before he gets me. But on the 4th round, I notice Ethan, like in the game, running up right behind me. I mean, he's really quick on the controller. So I know he's going to get me, but he doesn't. And I'm tapping every button I can to try to turn around to get him, but he's practically standing so close behind me that he could tap me on the shoulder. But then I remember which button turns me around, and I press it and I get him. I'm like, well, that was easy. And then it dawns on me, that was too easy. Ethan hasn't like fired a single shot at me. And I look at him incredulously and I ask, are you taking it easy on me? Well, of course, Dad, if I didn't, you'd be dead like 100 times. It wouldn't be any fun for you. Friends, that's what I used to do to my kids when they were little. And we played ball. I went easy on them because they won't play me anymore if I beat them too quickly. Oh my, how my tables have turned. But friends, this is what Jacob's opponent is doing to him. See, this is not an evenly matched wrestling bout. This is one wrestler holding back on the other. Verse 25 is the signal on that. Verse 25 says that wrestler, he, Jacob's opponent, touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. The wrestler dislocated his hip. Have you ever had a bone dislocated? I mean, it's awful. It's so painful. And this is like no pinky finger that's out of joint. This is Jacob's hip bone. And at the moment that hip bone is out, the match is over. Jacob, he's writhing in pain. You know, during that entire match, Jacob's got to be thinking, who is this? Like, I've expected to be fighting with Esau to get the issue with my brother behind me. But like, who's this? I mean, before the hip touch, Jacob, he's kind of been under the impression the guy he's wrestling is like an equal because they've been going at it for several hours. But when you look at that word touched in the Hebrew, it's a perfect translation of the Hebrew word. It doesn't say this mysterious wrestler grabbed Jacob and pulled his hip out. No, verse 25 says he just touched it. And instantly, his leg was paralyzed. And in that touch, this mysterious wrestler unveils that he had far more power than Jacob. He'd just been restraining himself from obliterating Jake. And the minute Jacob feels the touch of this stranger, he realizes who it is that's touched him. He realizes that he's had everything all wrong. He realizes what his real problem is, and he discovers the true meaning of his life isn't what he had thought. Instantly, all of this pours into Jacob's consciousness, and he immediately changes his strategy. Now, stay with me. Let me tell you what the new strategy is, and then I'm going to share how we can apply this epic story to our own lives. After Jacob's hip was dislocated, his opponent said, this is verse 26, "Let me go. I mean, it's daybreak." I mean, Jacob, he's got to know, right? There's no way he's going to win, so why is he still holding on to his opponent? Well, because before, he had no idea who he was wrestling. Now he knows. His opponent isn't just a man, but God himself. This is the high noon moment of his life. But it wasn't what he thought it would be. He thought he'd face his biggest problem, his brother Esau. But now he realizes his biggest problem isn't Esau, it's God. He's been trying to control God. He's been trying to fight and manipulate God his whole life. And in one touch, God shows him just a small taste of his power. And instantly, Jacob switches strategy and says, verse 26, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Do you see it? Before, Jacob steered clear of God. Now, Jacob dares to move toward him. He won't let God go. He changes his whole life towards God. In a flash, Jacob realizes that the prize he had wanted all of his life, that land, that inheritance, right? That wasn't the real prize. In that moment, he understands he had not been wanting the right thing. What he should have been wanting all along is God's nearness, God's presence. He was drawing near to the wrong things instead of drawing near to God. And in that moment, Jacob repents. He moves from struggling with God to struggling for God. Instantly, what he wants most, it's in verse 29. Jacob says, "Please tell me your name." Friends, that's Jacob's story. That was his big moment in life when he dared to move closer to God. And now, pick up your pens because in the next few minutes, I got 4 practical lessons in this for us. The first of which is this. You and I, we've been fighting God all along. Again, if you dare to get near God, he's going to show you your biggest problem. You might think your biggest problem is this or that, but God's going to show you that the real problem is you don't trust him. That's your problem. You've been fighting with God and he could have wiped you out long ago. Number 2, often God has to wound us to show us mercy. You know, Jacob had no idea who he was wrestling with until God touched that hip. And from that point on in Jacob's life, his limp was a constant sign of God's mercy. Why was this merciful? Well, it was mercy because it was far less than what Jacob deserved. God touched his hip to jar him to his senses. You know, the book of Proverbs says that wounds from a friend can be trusted. You know, sometimes we're wounded as an intervention to like jar us out of denial. Yeah, I got my limp. Do you have yours? Third thing we can learn. The only thing you and I really need is the reality of God. Do you know back in October, Michael Emmel, who worshiped here at the Pointe with us for years, he had back-to-back heart attacks, his main artery 100% blocked. When I visited him at Lutheran, he said, "Ray, I know my life is ending." But he had no fear. He says, if another heart attack puts me closer to God, I'll take it. That attack never came, but neither did his health recover, and Mike died on January 17th. Listen, if you ever hear someone say, "I don't care what happens to me as long as it puts me closer to God," I promise you this, that man, that woman has felt the reality of God. Jacob wrestles God, and when he realizes it's God, he doesn't want to let God go. Before he fought with God, now he fights for God. From the outside, his actions look the same, but his motivation had changed. Like Mike, he now wants God more than anything else. And if you think it's crazy for a man to say, "Well, take anything, God, as long as I've got you," all that really proves is that you've never known the reality of God yourself. I don't really mean to be harsh, but if you think it's nuts to ask for another heart attack just so that you can be near God, it kind of simply shows that you've never tasted the reality of God. Because anyone who has knows. They know the reality of God. It's worth losing everything. How? How do we wrestle for that reality? What does it mean to hold on like Jacob and say, "I won't let you go till you bless me"? It means you pray when you don't feel like it. It means you obey when it doesn't make sense. Jacob's a perfect example. He's holding on to God, even though he's hurting. Will you? All right, last lesson, number 4. You and I, we win by losing. You see, when Jacob encounters God, he doesn't get what he deserved, right? He deserves death, but God holds back. And the only pain Jacob gets is disciplinary pain. That was merciful. Why does God treat him with mercy? Well, look at verse 25. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip. Now, at first blush, that sentence doesn't seem to make sense. If the man is God, why does it look like God can't overpower Jacob? I mean, this passage seems to indicate that our all-powerful God can't beat a mere man in a wrestling match. It's not much of a God. Why doesn't it just say, well, hey, God could have killed him? Why does it say he could not overpower him? Well, here's why. If God used all his power, he would have won the match, but lost Jacob. Jacob would be obliterated. And this is true of Jesus, too. If Jesus had come to earth in power, he would have won the battle, but he would have lost every single one of us. But Jesus came, just like God came to Jacob. Jesus came in weakness. Jesus came, just like God came to Jacob. Jesus limited himself. And know what? Jesus won, like Jacob won. It kind of looks like Jacob lost badly. But what does God say in verse 28? He says, Jacob, your name's not going to be Jacob any longer, but Israel, because you've struggled with God and won. Friends, Jacob is a perfect picture. He wins by losing. And Jesus is too. He wins by losing. And the reason Jacob only got a touch of God's wrath on that hip was because the real messianic child, Jesus himself, got the full blast of it. Think, if just a touch would knock your hip out of joint, what would happen if you got the full blast of God's wrath? See, Jacob, he's saved through weakness. Jacob was saved because God limited himself. He's saved because really of the weakness of God, and so are you. How should you treat a God who treats us like that? I think, friends, you should go after him with all you've got. In fact, I dare you, move closer. Move closer to God right now. Let's pray together. Hey, God, would you help us stop fighting you and instead move towards you? So many of us don't have the reality of your presence. It's like there's really nothing going on spiritually inside of us. Today, may we start our wrestling match. May we realize that all our lives we've been fighting against you. Show us that, God, because some of us here, we think that's nonsense. Some of us here think our main problem is Esau, our finances, our careers, our relationships, all that. Help us right now, God, to see. Help us to see our main problem is that we're fighting you. And as we realize it, may we dare to move towards you, to hold on to you. And should holding on to you cost us everything we've got, may we realize that's the dare. That's the move. That's the challenge before us, that we may meet that dare and never let you go. God, we pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Hey friends, next week is just a fantastic week here at The Point, and I want to encourage you right now to just reach out digitally and invite a friend. I don't know whether you email or you text or you Snapchat, but would you reach out and invite a friend or family member to attend with you? Listen, I'm going to share next week how someone can meet Jesus and make the ultimate move that would change their eternal destiny. It's been fantastic being with you. Here's Todd with the details.
I want you to know we go live every Sunday, 9, 10:15, and 11:30. So I would love for you to like and subscribe to make sure that we can stay connected together all the time.